Well, thank you all for coming today. Again, the title of this talk is for Portlet 3, JSF 2.3, and the Faces Bridge. Now, I actually, if I could put in a shameless plug for a talk I'm doing later today, it's called Developing WABs with a View to the Future. And as I was putting these two presentations together, it was actually very difficult for me to decide which slide should go in which presentation, because they kind of dovetail together. So if you have time this afternoon, I think it might be helpful, and a helpful complement to this talk, to attend the WABs talk as well. Again, my name is Neil Griffin, and I normally tweet. It used to be my personal account, now it's the team account at Liferay Faces, so if you'd like to follow what we're up to. This is the Faces and JCP team. We used to be called the Liferay Faces team, but since we got involved in several different JSRs and now a little bit with the OSGi Alliance, the name of our team has been broadened. We have Juan Gonzalez, myself, Vernon Singleton, Kyle Steeman, and Phil White. So I want to briefly talk about the JCP. The JCP exists to develop standards for different Java technologies. And anyone can become a member. Actually, they made it quite easy now for individuals to join. So if you're interested in guiding the future of perhaps the Java programming language or different aspects of Java EE, you can join and potentially become a member of an expert group and contribute. The way these different standards are put together is through a JSR, a Java specification request. And a JSR has a spec lead and expert group members that contribute different ideas to how the technology should be defined. And when a JSR comes together, there's some work products that have to come out of this committee. We have to have a spec document. We need to create a Java API and the associated Java doc. And in the case of Portlets and JSF, we actually have a client-side JavaScript API as well. It needs to be documented. We have to have a reference implementation. In other words, that's an implementation that proves that the work that the expert group came up with can actually be implemented. And it's there for vendors to actually refer to. That's why it's called a reference implementation, to see how it can be done, or at least one way it can be done. And finally, there has to be a TCK, a technology compatibility kit. So anyone who wants to do an implementation of one of these JSRs has to pass all the tests in the TCK in order to become official. Well, let's talk about JSR 362, and I found this nice image of Duke riding a horse. I thought that was appropriate given our party last night. JSR 362 was led by IBM, by my friend Scott Nicholas, and he was here last year, if you recall, and gave us a demo for those of you who were here last year. This JSR convened in March of 2013, so we've been working on this for a while. But I'm happy to say the public review has been submitted. It happened on the 17th of October, and that means you have an opportunity to download the spec. Here it is. There's the spec, and read it. And take a look at the Java doc. The Java doc can be found online as well. Right here's the Java doc, and it's kind of color-coded so you can see what's new in version 3 and so on. It's very helpful. So now's your opportunity to review this and to download the reference implementation and look at the demos. I'm going to show some of them to you today and provide feedback, because the next stage would be for it to go final. So that the JCP Executive Committee would vote on it as to whether or not it actually becomes a final JSR. So let's talk about the main features of Portlet 3. One of the big things we wanted to do was to align with Java EE 7, in other words, the Servlet API. As you may know, the Portlet API has, it's layered on top of the Servlet API in a sense, but that's more or less an implementation detail. There's almost no dependencies on the Portlet API jar with the Servlet API jar. Really, it's just, well, in Portlet 2, it was just for for cookie. There are a couple of more small dependencies we have now. For example, the second bullet down there, you can see file upload. Rather than create a javax.portlet.part for multi-part file upload. We decided to just use the interface from the Servlet API. But if I could go in order, we'll be able to do configuration by annotations. Okay, so that's something that we've been able to do with web apps that now we can do with portlets, and I hope to show you a demo of that today. File upload, async support. I'm going to show you a demo of that today, a chat portlet using long polling. And there's heavy integration with CDI. If I could just stop here for a second and try and discuss the impact of this. There's a lot of CDI in Portlet 3. And this is actually something that you need to consider today as you're developing your Portlet 2 portlets for Liferay 7. How am I going to write portlets today knowing that CDI is going to be a nice feature that's available in Portlet 3? So again, that segues into the next talk this afternoon, but I'm going to try and help you feel the impact of that a little bit today. So you'll be able to create what we call bean portlets. You won't have to extend generic portlet anymore. And you can use @inject in order to inject a variety of dependencies into your classes. The render state is now more explicit. And if you look at the API, it was always there. It was comprised of the portlet mode, the window state, and the public render parameters. But now we actually call it render state, and it's much more clear in the API. We have a JavaScript client-side JavaScript library called the Portlet Hub, and I'm going to show you a demo of that today. And we also have the ability to add resources, client-side resources. So if any of you have ever developed 2 or more portlets and you have them on the same page and they're all using jQuery or something like that, and you don't want duplicate resources to show up on the page, this is now built in to the Portlet spec. It is up to Liferay or whoever implements the Portlet API to actually do the deconfliction, but that feature is there. One of the nice features in Portlet 3 that I really like is called the header phase. Now, historically, Liferay has been what we call a buffered portal, and we've had other portals out there. WebSphere portal, for example, was a streaming portal. Well, this distinction is kind of blurred now that we have the header phase. So when an HTTP GET request comes in, what's going to happen is, let's say I have 3 or 4 portlets on the page. What the portlet container has to do is it has to invoke what's called the header phase for each portlet first, and that has to be done in serial. Then once that completes, then the render phase will be invoked for each portlet on the page, but that can be in parallel if the underlying portlet container supports that. So I'm going to show you what this would look like if I were to extend generic portlet, which I don't need to do anymore, but I think this would be very familiar. There's a new render headers method. And that would give me the opportunity to add a dependency, for example, on jQuery, a particular version of it. And again, each vendor or each implementer of the Portlet API has the opportunity to supply this out of these different resources out of the box. Or you can inform the portal of where one of these, a URL of where one of these resources is located, perhaps within a resource URL of your portlet. Okay, well, let's talk about bean portlets. This is a nice feature, and it's an annotation-driven approach combined with CDI. So again, we no longer have to extend generic portlet anymore. So I'm going to try and do a demo here and see how well it goes. Okay. So here I've just got a very simple project. And you'll notice I do not have a web.xml descriptor in there. I do have a beans.xml that is required for this version of CDI. In the future, my understanding is you won't even need a beans.xml. There's no web.xml, there's no portlet.xml, there's no Liferay Portlet.xml, there's all those different descriptors are not there. And all I have is a Java class right here. It's called myBeanPortlet, and it's annotated with application scoped. So how do I develop portlets now with Portlet 3? Well, the old way is still supported, but I'm going to show you the new approach here. I just have a little snippet that I'm going to paste in here. Make sure I don't make a typing mistake. And if I can zoom in here. So what I did is I just pasted in a little public method called render1, and it has an annotation on it. This is a Portlet 3 annotation @render method, and I just have to declare what the name of my portlet is with an attribute inside the annotation. I get the writer from the response, and then I write out anything I might want to output in the portlet. So here, I'll do render1 DEVCON. And I will deploy it, because you can see I had deployed this earlier for a test, so I really want to show you there's nothing on my sleeve. It really does work. I changed the string. And I deployed, so if I reload the page, oh, I forgot to save. Save. Okay. That's it. I just made a portlet. It's that easy. Well, it gets better. I can actually have multiple render methods. So let me get to another snippet. And let's do a little CDI. Okay. Let's inject the portlet config. And let me load the imports. So now I've injected the portlet config, and I'm going to create another render method. This one's got an even easier approach. I'm just going to return a string. I don't even need to get the print writer in this one. You can see it just returns public string. Now, the order in which these render methods are executed is undefined, but there is an ordinal that you can put on there in order to control how you want them to display. So what I've done here is in this render2 method, I'm getting the config parameter foo. Well, that doesn't exist yet, right? So let me deploy this, and we'll see what happens. Did I not save it again? Oh. Okay, so it looks like render2 ordered first. Okay, so if I want to control that, I can do that with an ordinal. Right here, let's say I want render1 to happen first. I can do comma. Ordinal is equal to 0. And then ordinal is equal to 1. Well, you can see here that there is no value for my init parameter, so let's put a value on there. I don't have to go into my portlet.xml anymore. I can do that with an annotation. So let me put it right here. It's called @portlet configuration. And you can see I'm just specifying the name of my portlet and an init parameter for foo. And I'm going to save it, redeploy it, reload it. And it's supposed to work. Try it again. There we go. Okay, so I hope you can see that the programming model for developing portlets, at least using the Portlet API directly, has been greatly simplified. And so we're trying to reduce the barrier to adoption of portlets as a technology. And one of the ways we've done that is through CDI. Okay, so that's our Bean Portlet demo. Let's talk about Apache Pluto. The Apache Pluto project is the reference implementation for portlets. I don't know if you've ever been there to the Pluto website, but it's freely available. It's all open source under the Apache license. And it now fully implements all the features of Portlet 3. And one of the great things about it is that there's an all-new TCK. The TCK for Portlet 2 was a Sun or an Oracle copyrighted piece of software, but now the TCK has been entirely rewritten, and it's a Selenium type of test system, and it's all open source, and so it's there for you to take a look at it. Okay, along with a variety of demo portlets. Okay, so let's take a look at Pluto. This is Pluto right here. We've been looking at it. And there are a variety of demos that are available. Here's the Portlet Hub demo. This is the demo that Scott Nicholas showed us last year. And I'm just going to do a brief demo right here, where you can see here, if I select golf ball or baseball or foosball, you can see how the image on the right is changing. Well, let's see what's happening with that. Also, if you look at the URL, this is happening with XHR. So if I hit back or forward, we've integrated with a history API right there. Okay, so it's a nice demonstration of that use case. Well, let's see what's happening here. Let me inspect. Go to Network, XHR. And if I click on baseball, for example, there were 2 gets that took place. What that did is it changed a public render parameter, changed the render state, and a message was broadcast client-side to all the portlets that are interested in that. And of course, the portlet on the right that's displaying the image is interested in the render state changing. It hears that message, and it issues an XHR to update itself. So the first one right here is the XHR for the portlet on the right. You can see it's just a div, and it's got a form, and it's got an image in there for the baseball. So what happened is some HTML came back. We just updated the inner HTML of that div in the DOM. And then also a second request happened, a second XHR, and that was actually to update the DOM right here in this portlet. Now, just to give you an overview of all the demos that are here, okay, we have not the one that I want to show you. Oh no. I'm going to restart Pluto. Should be pretty quick here. Okay. So let's look at the async test right here. Okay. Has anyone ever worked with the Async API, the Servlet API? Async? Okay, one hand. Okay. I don't know about you, but I find it to be. It's not that it's an unclear API. It's just it seems to be a little bit difficult to use. So as I was examining this portlet, one of my contributions to this portlet was this little show hide help right here, so that you could actually see what this demo is all about. Anyway, I'm not going to read this at length, but this kind of just describes the overview of what's happening under the hood when you actually visit this portlet. But a better example of async down here is actually the chat room. Okay, so my name is Neil. Okay. And let's do Vernon. Vernon's a member of our team. And I can chat with Vernon right here. Hi, Vernon. Hi, Neil. And so on. So this is done with the Portlet 3 async API using long polling. Okay, so now that's built right into the Portlet API. There's some other features in here. For example, file upload. So multi-part form data file uploads are now built into the Portlet API. And so I can pick, let's see, what's a good image here to put in? How about the shirt? Okay, this is my 20-year-old Java shirt. And we're picking a color here just to show you that it's more parameters than just the file upload can be contributed in the multi-part form data post. So hit submit. Here we are, and we can see what color was selected, and we can see my shirt right here. Okay, dependencies. This is showing how you use the render headers feature, or if you're going to add client-side dependencies. So for this example here shows 3 different versions of jQuery. So if I select jQuery 2.3, and then I reload the page and click here to see the jQuery magic, it says, oh, you're using jQuery version 2.3. And just to show you that it really works, let's re-render using a different version. Click here, and that's version 2.2.1. Now that's because Pluto, or at least this demo, ships with these 3 versions of jQuery right here. So it is up to the portal vendor to actually supply these things. Again, if the portal vendor doesn't supply them, then as a Portlet developer, you can tell it where it can be found. Okay, and we did the chat room. Okay, back to the slides. So that's an overview of Pluto and the demos that are there. JSF 2.3 is well underway, and we now know that Oracle is fully behind Java EE8, and in parallel, they're working on Java EE9. And so JSF is a mature standards-based technology. And I love this quote here from Arjan. I'm going to learn more about him on the next slide. In 12 years, wow, not that many projects can claim that. Well, that's certainly true. 12 years. What were you doing 12 years ago? You know, what project were you working on? Well, I can think of another portal product that was around 12 years ago, Liferay, of course. But again, not many products can claim that, not many technologies. And there is a gold mine of know-how out there on the web. Anyone ever heard of Ballast C? Anyone ever seen him on, can I see a show of hands? Who's been helped by this guy on Stack Overflow? Okay. It's staggering the reputation that Balka has on he's in the top 0.01% of all users of Stack Overflow. And every answer that he's given here about JSF, it reads like a book, and it's very authoritative. So also his colleague Arjan is in the top 0.84% of Stack Overflow. Now I wanted to see where they measured up against Olaf, and it turns out that Olaf Koch is in the top 0.82% of Stack Overflow. So he's even ahead of Arjan. But this is the type of know-how we have there in the community. And these 2 gentlemen are on the expert group for JSF 2.3. Here are the features that have been added. Well, it's just an overview of them. There's support for WebSocket. There's integration with the Java 8 datetime API. There's a new feature called command script. And if you've ever used from Prime Faces, there's a nice component called remote command. That's a very similar concept to that. Multi-field validation and a lot of CDI alignment. Okay, so you're seeing Java EE and the Portlet spec moving more and more in the path of relying on CDI. In fact, CDI is kind of being pushed up the stack, even above the Servlet API. So it's moving closer and closer and closer to an API that all the other technologies within Java EE would depend on. If you want a comprehensive list of what's new in JSF 2.3, I would commend your reading of this blog by Arjan. Right here, I'll just click on it right here. What's new in JSF 2.3? Okay, so another feature in JSF 2.3 is alignment with Servlet 4. And Servlet 4 is going to feature HTTP 2. And one of the features that they're thinking about putting in JSF 2.3 is with JSF, when you render a page, JSF is fully aware of all the JavaScript and CSS type resources that are going to be necessary on the page. So if you have integration with HTTP 2, then you can inform the protocol of all these resources and just pipeline them in, and they can all be included within that first request. Okay, let's talk about the Liferay Faces project very briefly. We now have support for Liferay 7. We've had it since August of this year. We've modularized our version scheme, and we have lots of new archetypes. Just want to show you the homepage here at liferayfaces.org. Because our version scheme is now following a more modular type of path, it was actually, we realized it was, even though there were so many benefits to this, that the version scheme became more complex. And so let's say you want to use Liferay 6.2 and JSF 2.1 and Prime Faces or something like that. This portlet will show you exactly what archetype you would want to use to create your portlet, or you can just go down here to your dependencies, or if you're a Gradle fan, you can just you can get your build.gradle right here. You can actually still use the archetype generate command because there's a build.gradle file as well as a POM in there. So we now have 3 showcases. We have the Alloy showcase, the JSF showcase, and the Portal showcase. So I'm not going to demonstrate those to you today. I'll leave that to you if you're interested. And finally, I have a couple of minutes left. I'm the spec lead for JSR 3.78, and so we have Portlets as a standard, we have JSF as a standard, we also have the Faces bridge as a standard, and this is something we're developing for Portlet 3 and JSF 2.2. Our API has reached stability, and we're currently working on the RI, which is Liferay Faces bridge, and I have a demo here. Let's see if it comes up. This is IPC events. Nope, that's the wrong Pluto. I want this one over here. I want IPC events right here. Okay, now I'm going to turn on inspect, and this has integration with Portlet 3. So this is showing events IPC using the JSF Portlet bridge, all with XHR. So if I click here on this pencil, see where it says use selected Brian Green? Well, if we look here at the post that happened, what comes back from Pluto is a JSON document. So how can I explain? Normally, when you first hit a portal page, you get an HTML document, right? And it aggregates all the divs of all the different portlets that are on the page. Well, now with this scheme, what happens is the action phase will execute, the event phase will execute, however long the event phase goes back and forth, and then the resource phase will execute. Well, how do you represent that? What Pluto has decided to do is to return a large JSON document, and you can see here the render data for the portlet that invoked it. What comes back is actually XML. It's a JSF partial response. And you can see in there that Brian Green was selected, and so that's that blue right there. And then the portlet on the right has the opportunity to issue a subsequent XHR get in order to update its content. That's what this is right here. Now, there is some freedom here in the Portlet spec where, for example, Liferay Portal, when we implement this, we would have the opportunity in that JSON document to include not only the render data for the portlet on the left, but also for the portlet on the right. So we could do it with one request instead of 2. All right, and finally, what about JSF 2.3? Well, this is a JSR that has not been filed yet. We need to get a little further along before we can file this with the JCP. But regardless, we have a branch for it. We have an API and the RI, and I can just show you here just to prove that it's real. Pluto, in the 20 seconds I have left. 70, 80. Pluto. I'll try one more time. Let's see if I can log in. Okay, JSF applicant, and you can see right here it's using Mohara 2.3. Okay, so it doesn't mean we have all the features working, but we do have a branch for it. Okay, so thank you for coming. And again, I would encourage you to come to the talk later today if you're interested about how to develop your portlets today with a view to Portlet 3 in the future. Okay, thank you.